On this Monday night, Canada's first death from COVID-19.
We are deeply saddened.
Health officials reinforce an important message.
We need to protect each other.
And Canadians get ready to disembark this contaminated cruise ship.
Well, I'm one of the ones that are vulnerable.
Breaking news on Italy's unprecedented lockdown and the downward spiral for the markets and oil prices. Global News investigates rising violence on Via Rail trains.
He came at me with an axe.
The push to better protect passengers and stepping out one last time, Harry and Meghan's swan song as senior royals.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with fast-moving developments about the coronavirus, including the first reported death in Canada. An elderly man in British Columbia, a resident in a care home, has died of COVID-19. A reminder that it is the elderly who are most at risk. Tonight, public health officers have a message for Canadians. Now is the time for all of us to self-distance from each other to reduce the chance of spreading the virus.
It is time to start greeting each other with elbow bumps or waves instead of handshakes. This is not an overreaction, but a very practical way of limiting the spread of germs.
In Canada, there are now 77 cases. That includes 34 in Ontario, 32 in BC, 7 in Alberta, 4 in Quebec, and today the first death.
I want to reassure Canadians that we have our top medical experts, our top scientists on this issue. We are coordinating with provincial authorities. We are working together.
Canadians are now being advised to avoid all cruise ship travel. The other big shock today was a crash on stock markets and a plummet in oil prices. We're going to explain all of that tonight. We begin in British Columbia with what we know about the outbreak at that nursing home. Robin Gill has our top story tonight.
This long-term care facility in a Vancouver suburb is home to seniors, many who have underlying medical concerns. Then the new coronavirus somehow crept in and took the life of one man.
This is obviously a very sad day for all of us, but especially, of course, for the family and loved ones of the man who passed away.
Another resident has tested positive. A healthcare worker got sick from working here. And there are more potential cases of COVID-19 in the care home. All of the healthcare workers are being questioned about where else they've been, because as part of the job, they work at other facilities and even hospitals.
It's a challenge with our system, healthcare workers, and we know that whether it's care workers or nurses or even physicians, we work in many different health authorities, many different facilities sometimes. That is part of the ongoing investigation.
This ombudsperson for seniors says there are already hundreds of outbreaks of flu and pneumonia at care homes across the country. Now add in COVID-19.
You've got people who are already vulnerable, living in an environment where the transmission of the virus is going to be more difficult to control because they're living in a communal environment and they're touching things that a lot of other people are touching.
Just take a look at what happened at a nursing home in a Seattle suburb. 13 residents and a visitor died from the virus. 70 staff members are sick with symptoms resembling the new coronavirus.
It's an occupational health and safety issue, but it's also a public health issue.
Canada's Federation of Nurses says protocols for staff need to be reviewed given this health crisis.
You need to look at the uniforms, look at cleaning your shoes, etc. when you leave the facilities.
At most care homes in Canada, visits are being limited, tests are being done, and extra staff are being brought in. There are no signs of COVID-19 at other care homes in this country yet.
It is very much a concern of ours.
This disease is new, it's evolving, and it's constantly on the move. And that uncertainty makes it even scarier for the elderly. Robin Gill, Global News, North Vancouver.
Here's the big picture with COVID-19 right now. There are more than 113,000 cases in the world in more than 110 countries, and there are more than 3,900 deaths. It has a foothold in so many countries now, and the risk of further spread keeps rising. Because of that, Canada's top doctor has new advice for Canadians. Avoid all travel on cruise ships.
Cruise ships have passengers from around the world who may be arriving from areas with known or unknown spread of the novel coronavirus.
That advice is too late for thousands of passengers, including 237 Canadians on board the Grand Princess. It's now docked at the port of Oakland, California. 21 people on board have tested positive, and tonight passengers are disembarking. You can see people lined up at different tents, including the Canadian one. Everyone is a step closer to getting to a hospital now or to quarantine. Canadians who are symptom-free will be put on a government-chartered flight to CFB Trenton in Ontario. Abigail Bimman reports on how they found out and what happens now.
We may not be able to return anything left on board in a timely manner, if at all.
An announcement from the Grand Princess in the middle of a global news interview. Ron Romanato and Karen Spoon Goldman are two of the 237 Canadians on board, waiting to get home to Montreal.
You know, we're in good health. We haven't been coughing, we haven't been sick.
I'm 82.
Robert Grubb of BC is more concerned about medication than contracting coronavirus.
Well, yes, I'm concerned because I am diabetic. I'm one of the ones that are vulnerable, and I'm still waiting for my medications to arrive on board from Princess.
At the request of the United States, Canada is sending a plane to Oakland to pick up Canadian cruise passengers.
If they exhibit symptoms of COVID-19, they will not be permitted to board. They will be cared for by the U.S. healthcare system.
We have agreed that the cruise line will be assuming the costs of the plane to repatriate Canadians.
At this point, Canada is not issuing a travel advisory to the United States, where the number of cases and deaths keep climbing.
We are prepared. And with this step today, this is the difference between being reactive and planning ahead.
That's the mayor of Detroit announcing the city will turn the taps back on for people cut off from water for not paying the bill.
We are introducing New York State Clean hand sanitizer.
While New York distributes its own hand sanitizer and the head of its port authority contracted the virus.
This is a superior product to products now on the market.
Different steps in different states, while the Trump administration is criticized for a slow rollout of tests.
Deception and denial are not a strategy. What we've seen at the federal level is too much lowballing and bungling.
As for the president, he didn't hold back from shaking hands at a fundraiser stop in Florida. Here in Washington, one of the first two people to contract the virus is the rector of this church. Health officials are asking anyone who came into contact with him to self-isolate for 14 days. And since he shook hands with parishioners and provided communion, that's likely to be hundreds of people. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Washington.
It's been anything but smooth sailing on the stock market today. Fears of the spread of COVID-19 plus a crash in oil prices pushed rattled investors to sell so fast today. Trading was temporarily halted at one point. Crude oil prices nosedived, the biggest single-day drop since 1991. Shares in oil companies fell with them. Brent crude, the international benchmark, fell nearly 30% at one point, dipping to $32 U.S. a barrel. The plummet was so steep, trading circuit breakers were tripped this morning to pause the system and calm the panic. The Dow Jones ended the day more than 2,000 points down, closing below 24,000 points. The TSX in Toronto took a 10% dive, closing more than 1,600 points down. David Akin is keeping track of all of this for us and the impact on Canada. David.
Right. Well, we start the day with the idea that worldwide travel has dried up because of COVID-19. And with no one using those planes, trains, and cruise ships, the demand for fuel has plummeted.
That, in turn, has put downward pressure on oil prices. Now, Saudi Arabia wanted to keep oil prices up by cutting back on production, but Russia would not go along. And so Saudi Arabia decided Sunday to slash its oil prices, betting that Saudi Arabia could stand the pain of lower oil prices longer than Russia could. But now, every oil-producing country, including Canada, has had to cut prices, which means less revenue for sectors connected to the energy industry. Less revenue equals less profit, and there's your stock market sell-off.
This is a global bun fight that has Canada just in the crosshairs between Saudi Arabia and Russia, and so it's not something where we have a lot of ability to control it.
So, David, is there anything the federal government can do to mitigate the impact on Canada's economy? What did the finance minister say today?
Well, Bill Morneau just finished talking to us, and he first of all wanted to offer some reassurance. He said Canada's fiscal position, very healthy, relatively low debt. Second, he wanted to assure Canadians that our banking system is fine. He says both of those things are strengths that will help the government help Canadians.
Of
course, we're also making sure that we tell people that we have their backs, that we are thinking about impacts on individuals, employees, that we are focused on how we can support businesses to the extent businesses need to be supported.
But any specific measures are days away.
We're working on some responses right now. So I think what you'll see from us is a continued approach where as we have measures that we think are appropriate to roll out, based on the facts, we will do so, and you'll see some things this week.
The drop in oil prices, David, is the last thing oil producers in this country need. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney sounds like he might be moving into crisis mode. What's he planning?
Yeah, very close to it. Very serious, very sober Premier this afternoon. Kenney said this oil price shock represents what he called a profound challenge for Alberta and for Canada.
Hundreds of thousands of Canadians depend on the energy sector directly for their livelihoods, and all 36 million Canadians benefit from it, at least indirectly.
Now, Kenney and all other premiers are going to be in Ottawa later this week to meet with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And by then, we expect to learn when will Bill Morneau table this year's budget. And the premiers, like Kenney, will certainly be looking to this week's meetings to get a sense of just exactly how Ottawa plans to help. Donna?
All right, David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. In Italy, the lockdown in the north has now been extended to the entire country of 60 million people. Travel is restricted, public events, including weddings and funerals, have been halted, and popular tourist destinations are deserted. The death toll in Italy from COVID-19 jumped by 97 to 463 today. The Prime Minister calls the outbreak in Italy its darkest hour. There are more than 9,000 cases, making Italy the second largest epicenter outside China and the worst in Europe. Countries around the world are beginning to further restrict the movement of people to slow the spread. In the Republic of Ireland, St. Patrick's Day parades have all been cancelled. The parade in Dublin, which usually attracts 500,000 people, is a massive boost for tourism, but not this year. Ireland has 21 COVID-19 cases, and the health minister expects a rapid escalation in the days ahead. Well, we know you have lots of questions about this virus, and we want to help answer them. You can send an email to your questions at globalnews.ca. Our Jeff Semple will consult experts to try to find the answers. You'll also find extensive information on our website. We have a special page dedicated entirely to the new coronavirus. That's at globalnews.ca/coronavirus. The trial of 4 men accused in the shooting down of a Malaysian Airlines passenger plane is now underway in the Netherlands. Nearly 300 people died when that aircraft was hit by a surface-to-air missile over eastern Ukraine in 2014. The 4 accused didn't pull the trigger on the missile system, but they are believed to have put it in the hands of the people who did. Mike Armstrong explains.
In a trial set to stretch over several months, one of the first steps on this, day 1, was to enter the names of the victims into the record.
Firdaus bin Abdul Rahim.
It would take this Dutch prosecutor 18 minutes to read all 298. Hearing those names for family members in court was bittersweet.
It's so important to find the truth, and it's a sad day but exciting.
Dutch authorities have charged 3 Russians and 1 Ukrainian for their roles in the shooting down of the aircraft. At the time, each was in a senior position in the rebel militias that controlled eastern Ukraine. They're being tried for murder in absentia. They're all believed to be in Russia. Only 1 has a legal team participating.
Stelt zich op het standpunt.
Oleg Pulatov's lawyer says her client had nothing to do with what happened. But a Dutch-led joint investigative team concluded the missile system had been moved from Russia and fired by pro-Russia rebels. The report's 13 witnesses will testify in the trial, but their identities will be kept secret. Canadian Michael Bossecu was an observer on the ground in the aftermath of MH17. He's in the Netherlands for the trial. Bossecu says witnesses have been threatened and that in this case those threats should be taken seriously.
When witnesses are threatened, it could be as bad as a bullet to the head. So very, very difficult circumstances.
While the trial is underway, the investigative team continues its work and has dozens of other names of people involved. The trial has started, but new suspects could be added down the road. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
Coming up, Ottawa's push to outlaw conversion therapy. The The federal government has introduced legislation that would amend the criminal code and ban conversion therapy. The discredited practice seeks to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. It's been resoundingly rejected, both medically and scientifically, and denounced as harmful. A number of cities and provinces have already imposed bans on it. Heather Urix-West explains why the federal government is taking this next step.
Jonathan Brower was 20 the first time he took part in conversion therapy. Deeply religious, he felt he had no choice but to try and do whatever he could to not be gay.
It's not a choice when your faith, family, and community give you no option but heterosexuality. So at that point, you either leave your faith and stand to lose everyone you love, or you try to fit the picture of what they want.
Not only was the therapy unsuccessful, it left Browers feeling hopeless and suicidal.
Conversion therapy has been discredited and denounced by professional and health associations in Canada and in the United States and around the world. It has no basis in science or healthcare practices. Rather, its devastating effects have been felt time and time again.
The Liberal government's proposed bill would change Canada's criminal code. Providing conversion therapy to anyone under age 18 would be a crime, and it would also be illegal to advertise or benefit from the practice financially. But survivors like advocate Erica Muse says the bill doesn't go far enough and leaves people vulnerable.
I can't say that this is what I need and what Canadians need to make sure no one else is hurt like me. I can't say that this is a ban that would make me safe.
The Justice Minister says the bill worked to balance progressive policy with constitutional considerations. For Brower, it's still an important step.
These organizations and systems of belief have really pathologized something beautiful and called it sinful. So this is a pivotal Canadian moment, I believe, to right that wrong.
Heather Urix-West, Global News, Calgary.
Ahead, what hidden safety risks are travelers facing on Via Rail?
You're watching Global National.
We're examining rail travel in this country tonight. Some people rely on Via Rail passenger service in Canada, but not every ride is completely safe. There's been a rise in violent attacks, and security on board is scarce, though Via is working on increasing it. Tonight, Megan Robinson investigates the scope of the problem and the risks to passengers and crew.
For 35 years, Fabien Bisson cheerfully served and entertained Via Rail passengers. He often worked on the Canadian, the world-famous route between Vancouver and Toronto. It can be a comfortable ride, despite frequent delays.
5-star hotel on wheels.
But Bisson, who retired earlier this year, saw another side of train travel.
Hey, guys!
Bisson says the two men fighting in this video were later arrested by RCMP.
We know when we get the people coming in to us because they're acting a certain way. And when this is taking place, you know if you're going to have a good trip or a bad trip. You know if you're going to call the cops at one point or not call the cops.
In 2011, Bisson's teenage daughter was on board. At 2 a.m., Bisson says she was startled awake by a man wildly swinging an axe.
I grabbed him by the throat and I squeezed him so much and he fell on the ground. That was a moment of my life where I was fighting, because I didn't know if that guy was going to come up or not.
Attacks like these used to be isolated, according to former and current employees we spoke to. But internal Via Rail statistics show an increase of violence or unruly behavior on board after October 2018. That also happens to be when Greyhound canceled bus routes in Western Canada. Documents obtained by Global News show at least 20 security incidents on Western Canadian train routes from January 2017 to November 2018. But after the Greyhound cancellations, there was a spike. In just over a year, there were at least 46 security incidents, more than double the previous 2 years combined.
There has been more and have not even been investigated yet. And now that's becoming a problem, because I don't know if we're trying to hide those, because there is a problem.
Some of that recent violence on board the Canadian includes a knife attack and a passenger tasering an attendant. What employees are now facing between Vancouver and Toronto may be symptoms of larger national issues related to homelessness, mental illness, and drug abuse.
We take social issue with us, we put it on board, we're going to carry them somewhere else in the country.
They're not a drop-in, they're not a shelter, they're not a mental health agency. So same as with on planes, you expect people to provide first aid or be kind, help people, but they have a much different job and role.
Via Rail declined an on-camera interview but said in a statement, Via Rail Canada Police has 14 appointed constables. It also says it works with community partners to address education, prevention, and crisis intervention strategies for those with mental illness or substance dependency. Transport Canada says it's proposing new regulations requiring passenger rail companies to improve their own security. But Bissell says he wants to see improved security measures immediately.
Don't want to wait for someone to get hurt or die, kill, even die, of a situation before we act.
Megan Robinson, Global News, Toronto.
Tomorrow we look at Via Rail, how reliable it is and isn't, and just how costly the delays can be. Next, Harry and Meghan take their last steps in the royal spotlight. Call it their swan song. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have carried out their final public engagement as working members of the royal family. Harry and Meghan attended the Commonwealth service at Westminster Abbey today. They were ushered to their seats ahead of the Queen's entrance, as was Harry's brother William and his wife Kate. The couples, once known as the Fab Four, were seated close to each other. It's not clear when they'll all be together again. Queen Elizabeth II entered the Abbey with the usual pomp and ceremony. The service marks the end of a 2-month family drama that became public when Harry and Meghan posted on Instagram they plan to chart a new course for themselves and give up royal life. Harry will remain 6th in line to the throne, but at the end of the month they'll stop using their royal titles. They'll also give up most public funding and intend to earn their own living. And for now, they're expected to return to their new life here in Canada. And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is really your night sky. This is the first supermoon of 2020. At 100% illumination, it is 2,000 times brighter than the next brightest object, Venus. So keep an eye out for it. And thanks for watching. Bye-bye.